Good evening, everyone. My name is Nancy Hames, and I'm with the Environmental Committee at the Eastport Yacht Club. I want to give a warm welcome to our members and our esteemed guests, and to our speaker tonight, Rick Hutzell. And it's my pleasure to introduce Rick. He is editor of Capital Gazette, and he's going to provide a journalist's perspective on breaking environmental issues. And at this point in time, not only are several environmental issues heating up in our area, as they always do, like the fact that Annapolis is suing the fossil fuel companies, and there are current and expected future changes in the political and environmental leadership. But the Capital Gazette the newspaper is also in the news. It may soon be sold to a local nonprofit organization. The long-awaited and delayed sanity trial of the newsroom shooter is scheduled to begin in June, 3 years after the event. Maryland's legislators have asked President Biden to award the 5 shooting victims the Medal of Freedom, which is our nation's highest civilian honor. And that would send a strong message globally to the importance of freedom of the press. And now NPR is featuring the Capitol's team in a podcast called Embedded, which covers the lives of the survivors following the shooting. It's journalists covering journalists. And I found the first of the 4 episodes to be very moving. I highly recommend that you watch it. And finally, another event, the Capitol's editor, Rick Hutzell, is here tonight with Eastport Yacht Club to give his perspective on environmental issues affecting our region. Having once been an editor myself, I believe that editors and journalists provide a unique perspective. Unlike most of us, they have the license to ask just about any question in order to inform their constituents with accuracy and timeliness. It does not mean that they always get the answers, but they are asking those questions on our behalf every single day. The Capitol is part of Baltimore Sun Media and Tribune Publishing, and it serves the greater Annapolis and Anne Arundel County region. In 2019, the team was honored with a Pulitzer Prize for their courageous response to the killing of their fellow journalists, and for demonstrating unflagging commitment to covering the news and serving our community. And Rick is the leader of that editorial team. He's been with the Capitol for 34 years, since 1987. And when he was hired, he told his boss his plan was to stay for 2 years. Clearly, he loves his job. He lives in Annapolis with his wife, Chara, and they have 2 adult children. Rick, I'm going to turn it over to you to hear your perspective. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm good. Am I speaking? Good, okay. Thank you very much for the invitation. I have high regard for the Eastport Yacht Club. I was telling Nancy earlier, my first memory of the Eastport Yacht Club was standing in a parking lot, drinking a beer during the Whitbread Round the World race when it came to Annapolis. And that was the name before they changed it to the Volvo Ocean Race, the two iterations that it came here. It's in a beautiful spot. It runs a lot of good programs, and I'm just happy to be here talking to you. When Nancy asked me to talk to the club about our environmental coverage, and just full disclosure, Nancy and I live in the same neighborhood. And so, she has seen me huffing and puffing around my neighborhood trying to run with my 20-pound Bichon Frise pulling me along. So she knows what journalism is really all about. I try to think back to the coverage, it started when I was here, and then I started to think a little further back. When did the Capitol start covering environment as an issue? So I did a search in our archives, and up until 1952, I can find no reference to the word environment or environmental, in which it's talking about things that we tend to assume, that means. It talked about the environment of children, or it talked about perhaps close enough, an environmental engineer in terms of sanitation. Somebody runs a sewer plant, or septic is concerned about septic tanks. So I'm going to share a screen with you real quick, and bear with me because I've got this split about 3 different ways. Share a screen with you real quick. Let's see, there it is. Can you all see that? That is the blue there. Is a story from 1952 that I think is the first use of the word environmental in referring to the bay, and it's about sea nettles. It's about the environmental conditions that lead to sea nettles. Now, for any of you who swim in the bay, you know that sea nettles are a difficult. See if I can unscreen that and get back to myself. You know, it's something that we understand a little bit more now, but that's the first reference that I can see to it in our stories. And so we've been writing about the environment for decades. You know, most people think of the modern American environmental movement as starting with Rachel Carson and Silent Spring. I think we just passed the 100th anniversary of her birth, you know, but so there's some renewed interest in her book, you know, and that was about the impact of DDT on birds, particularly on their egg shells. It was causing a decline in the successful birth rate among many bird species. But something else that happened in the same era in the 1970s in this county, there was a proposal to build an oil docking station up where Brandon Shores and the Wagner power plants are. It would have been oil tankers unloading their crude into Baltimore. And there were a lot of protests about that. It was successfully blocked. Something that came out of that was the North County Land Trust, I think. But there was an environmental awareness that started there. And it was the classic argument that you see, you know, it was the environment, people who wanted to protect the environment versus the people who wanted to write about, who wanted to protect the natural beauty, jobs for economy versus the jobs. We've written about a number of things over the year. Let me share my screen again here. You know, if you read Gerald Weingrad's column, and I understand he's speaking next week, he's recently written about some of the things that he dealt with as a state senator in the 80s. And we covered, you know, a lot of those issues, the phosphate ban. Let's see if I can pick up a cartoon by editor Eric Smith, appeared in Sunday's paper. Should be able to see that. Eric was the longtime editor.
Hey, Rick.
Yep.
I apologize for interrupting, but we're currently seeing your file folder.
You're not seeing the thing. Okay, let's see.
So now we're back out of screen share.
Let's see if I can make that happen. Is that better? Can you see it?
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much.
So that's a column that ran. I pardon the blue tint. That is something I did by accident in trying to get rid of the sepia tone that happens to newsprint when you let it sit around for years. So, you know, Gerald led the effort to ban phosphates, which were considered to be crucial to the effectiveness of detergents. And it went on forever. The lobbying effort in that was intense and full of misleading statements, which we covered, as well as the Sun and the Post. There was a lot more interest in what's going on in local news than among newspapers. You know, now you see a lot of more national things. You know, fast forward to a couple of years ago. Let me see if I can get this one up. You guys may recognize one of the names in this story over here. If you can you see that? Have I got it set up right? This is.
So you'll need to stop the screen share and then start again with the new file.
All right, let's start that. All right, so let me try this again. See if I can do this right. Can you see that over there? Club builds oyster reefs under its docks. So that is the Eastport Yacht Club. And if you'll notice there, Virginia Tipple, I think, is with us this evening. And so this was during a period where we didn't have an environmental reporter. We lost, excuse me, we had lost a position, and we were kind of struggling with figuring out how to reallocate beats and things like that. So for about 18 months, we decided we would bicycle a story, which was oyster recovery. Everybody in the newsroom, including me, I actually wrote that, wrote about something. We sent an intern named Alex Mann to the Choptank River watershed to cover oyster restoration efforts there. And we did stories like this. We talked about the oyster reef effort under the docks there at your club. You know, we covered when it won an award a few years later. And so we've covered the whole gamut from the very beginning to things that are going on now. I think somebody asked me at the beginning of this if we would talk about this story. Let me share it again. All right, can you see that? That's today's story. Annapolis sues 26 oil and gas companies for their role in contributing to climate change. We continue to cover environmental issues today.
We're not seeing.
You're not seeing it, okay. All right, you know what? I think we're just gonna look at me. So, today's story was about the city's lawsuit against 26 oil and gas companies over climate change. And so, we've just covered the whole gamut over the years. Sometimes it has been about, threats to the environment. Sometimes it has been about the way people use the environment. On Monday, we had a story about swimmers who are currently doing a mile in waters right now. Very chilly and a very organized thing. Sounds crazy, but they really made it sound like a very pleasant thing. And a lot of it depends on the strengths we have. We've discovered that environmental reporting is kind of a unique thing. And we're good or we're bad on it depending on what our staff is. Right now, we don't have anybody who is focusing on it. We're reorganizing some beats after some departures. We expect that to change in the coming months. Tomorrow's paper, we'll have a story about the Bay Bridge environmental impact study that's just been released for comment. So we continue to cover these even when sometimes we have to juggle things to figure out how to do it. I think if there's anything that we have not done well in covering the environment, it's in covering the critical mass of environmental groups here in Annapolis. For any of those, Annapolis is a hub for environmental nonprofits, for government agencies, and for activism. Obviously the governor's office is here and they have a lot of say over regulation. Maryland Department of the Environment is in Baltimore. I think that's a shame. But the Maryland Department of Natural Resources is here. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is here. Chesapeake Bay Program is here. And so what I think is the threshold that we have yet to cross is figuring out how to cover them to keep them on their toes. I mean, one of the things that journalists do is that we speak truth to power. We have a whole bunch of things we can put on t-shirts. One of the ones that my wife really hates is the one, if your mother says if your mother says she loves you, check it out. But so we have all these different things we tell each other. It's a whole culture. But one of the ones we do is we speak truth to power, and there's a lot of power in the environmental community in Annapolis. These groups are some of them are incredibly well-funded. Chesapeake Bay Foundation has just a ton of money. Gerald Weingrad, who you'll be speaking to next week, is a huge critic of them. He thinks their involvement in the oyster restoration programs is a way for them to keep money flowing through their organization, whereas they should be doing other things, fighting for oyster moratorium, which is something that we've argued for. So there's actually I believe it is a Saudi funded, correct me if I'm wrong, World Ocean Society, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, that's based in Annapolis that is really not focused on the Bay, but is focused on world oceans. I'm not sure why that's here. We've never gotten to that story. So there's still lots of things that we need to report on. We've been in the news ourselves a lot. It seems like, one of the things you don't want a journalist to do is to write about themselves. That's not great journalism. We've written a lot about ourselves since 2018, obviously. We've also written about ourselves in the past couple of days as news has come that we are about to be sold again. Just for the record, this will make my 8th publisher. And they've all been lovely people. If you've ever had a boss, no, they've all been lovely people, and all of them care about journalism and they care about the communities that they report on. My understanding of this is that Tribune Publishing, which purchased us when they came out of bankruptcy in 2014, that they are being sold to their majority shareholder, which is Alden Capital, I think is the name. They are a hedge fund that leverages companies for profit. Perfectly legitimate thing to do. It's capitalism. It's America. But there has been criticism of Alden and how much they invest in journalism itself. They own 300 newspapers through other companies. Me personally, I think some of the stuff about them is exaggerated. If you know any journalists, you know that no one likes to complain as much as journalists about journalism. It's just part of the culture. And so what happens to Tribune, I don't know, but we're being split off. There is a proposal from Stuart Bainham, who is, a former state lawmaker. And he is also, I believe, his family owns Choice Hotels, and there's another brand, extremely wealthy, and he is paying $63 million for Baltimore Sun Media Group, which includes the Capitol. We were purchased by Tribune and Baltimore Sun Media in 2014, and the past 6 years, 6 years, has been, somewhat the merging of our cultures. And so we are interested in this because the business model of journalism has changed to the point where the old ways that we found revenue to make our journalism work are gone. Facebook, Amazon own 80% of advertising, and that was how we paid our salaries. That was how the owners of the company made a profit. That is how we kept our operations going. And as that has happened, the revenues have been smaller, and so you've seen some contraction in our staffs. You've seen some contraction in what we're able to do. Some of the things have gone away that we have done, may never come back. This is not a story that's unique to Annapolis, but this purchase by a nonprofit, it presents some interesting possibilities. I must say that I have no inside knowledge of what Mr. Bainham plans for the company. He might understand, we've reported that he has a non-disclosure agreement and cannot talk about it until the deal is done at the end of the second quarter. So end of June, beginning of July, we should be finding some more details. But he is committed to journalism, and there are some models. The Philadelphia Inquirer is a nonprofit, and my understanding is that Mr. Bainham has worked with the foundation that has made that work. ProPublica, we had a year-long project with them in which we looked at public housing in this community. They're nonprofit. There are several others that work and do good journalism. But I don't know that anyone has done a community journalism nonprofit before. And so we'll see what happens. One of the things I'm interested in that is covering areas that are currently not covered. There are two huge news deserts in Maryland that are simply shocking. Prince George's County has no newsroom like the Capitol. Prince George's County has almost 1 million residents. We have 600,000. Montgomery County, where Mr. Bainham lives, has no newsroom like the Capitol. They have blogs and other organizations that do something. But since the Gazette newspapers of Maryland, a name that confused people endlessly with the Maryland Gazette, folded maybe 7 years ago, there's been nobody attending city council meetings and publishing a newspaper about it. There are other people out there doing it. It's not a complete blackout, but the Washington Post really, which covers those areas, really doesn't do that. So I think that may be something that he focused on. That's just my surmise. But here's an interesting thing. I've talked about how over the years we've had trouble keeping our environmental beat focused, filled. One reason for that is that the stories we write about the environment tend to be very local, tend to be very Chesapeake oriented. And day in, day out, they aren't the best read stories on our website. I have some reasons I think I understand why. I think it has to do with the hierarchy of needs. People are focused on putting food on their table. People are focused on their job. They're focused on, maybe some other things before they get down to the environment. And so it's not always for the Capitol, it's not often been a beat that is we just don't have an environmental reporter. We might have a reporter who is environment and something else, and that something else has changed. When I first got here, a reporter named Scott Harper was the environment reporter. He covered the environment and South County, Edgewater South. So it's matched up with a lot of things. Some of those combinations have been successful. Some of them have not. The goal is to match it up with something that, you know, gives you enough time to do the stories. But, you know, there's not going to be an environment story on the front page every day that screams, read me. So wouldn't this be interesting? In a nonprofit model, the nonprofit owner works with organizations to provide grants to cover different things. You know, so in the news deserts I mentioned, perhaps there's a grant out there to provide daily news for Prince George's County. I think that would be great. It's a huge county. There's lots of interesting things there. People deserve to have the kind of coverage and the good things that journalism brings. You know, they're democratic small d issue machine. They help the country grow. There have been studies that show that newspapers actually keep your tax bill lower because you write about tax spending. You know, corruption in government is something, local government is something that newspapers cover a lot. The Baltimore Sun just won a Pulitzer Prize for the coverage of the shameful behavior of the mayor of Baltimore with regard to her, you know, sweetheart deals about the little book that she wrote, Healthy Holly. We played a vital role in the coverage of John Leopold, who was the county executive who spent 30 days in jail for abusing his office. So there's watchdog, there's good government, there's you know, sense of community, all these things that come out of journalism. Those communities don't have them. But what would happen if environmental groups created a grant to fund a journalism position that covered the environment? I think there's enough to do it. I mean, I read the Bay Journal, and some of the stuff they write is fascinating. They're a nonprofit model. I believe they're part of a larger organization. I think, is it part of the University of Maryland? I'm not sure. But I think what they do is interesting. It's not widely read. You know, I think what Tom Pelton does for the Center for the Environmental Justice does is really interesting. I don't think it's widely consumed by the average person. There are issues that are changing in environment. You know, there's still lots of room to grow in cleaning up the bay. You know, we've done the easy stuff with cleaning up pollution plants. Non-point pollution, stormwater runoff, farm runoff are the next big things. But then there's this issue of environmental justice that we're just kind of entering the era in, and that communities of color, communities of indigenous people, communities of poverty tend to be the ones that suffer the greatest harm by environmental degradation, pollution, and disregard for the law. You know, and this is not something new. I'm from, for those who don't know, I'm from Ocean City, and I went to Stephen Decatur High School, which was built right next to a landfill in Worcester County. And if you don't think that was weird, there were families living right next to the landfill. They built the landfill in the middle of a historic Black community. I don't know what the story of that is, but it sure does sound like there's a story there to tell. And so I think that there are fields to explore in environmental journalism. The question is how to do it. So I'm kind of excited about this new ownership model because I think it presents a way to grow rather than constantly be figuring out, okay, what can we do with diminished resources because advertising is owned by Google and Amazon and Facebook. So my own interest in environment, I don't consider myself an environmentalist. I consider myself a journalist, but I am conscious of a lot of environmental issues, both in this community and wider. I think that's important because it is an issue that is incredibly significant to this community, not only because we're on the water, but because we're a historic community. I think that it ranges from issues of public access to the water. We have written about that recently, and there will be a story on tomorrow's front page about it. You know, and we've written about who has access to the water. If you remember the stories last summer about Alderman Dwan Gay, and then the city's efforts to kind of figure out something to do with Hawkins Cove, forgive me if I've got the name wrong, which is a small waterway which has a city-funded dock, which is actually on property that you have to cross the housing authority property to get to. there's just a lot of fascinating issues here in terms of the environment. And there are a lot of people who are concerned about it. Our job is to figure out what is journalism and what is boosterism, kind of stay away from boosterism if we can. So that's my sort of rambling vision of what we do. I can talk about individual issues. I can talk about stories we've done. I can talk about our future. Open to questions. Have at it.
Thank you, Rick. I forgot to tell people to put their questions in the chat room. So, Dan, can we let people unmute and ask the question?
That's fine.
We can, yes.
Diana has a question. Go ahead, Diana.
So Rick, I was just commenting earlier on the front page of the newspaper today about the city's lawsuit against big fossil fuel companies. Just wondering what your thoughts are on that. And I want to start with saying that the litigation does not cost taxpayers $1.
It does not.
It's a good thing, and it should be said right in the first paragraph. But I think they missed that.
Yeah, I think it was. Well, you know, we get to decide what's in the first paragraph. But
I get that.
I think it's fair. I think it's fair to criticize us for not what we put in the first paragraph, but it's our decision. So, you know, and that's one of the things I do like our opinion page, because people call us out for being fools and idiots all the time. And I will say it's a fascinating development. I think it follows very closely on the heels of the opioid lawsuit. And Annapolis was late to that. And that followed on the heels of the asbestos lawsuit. And that followed on I can't remember which came first, the asbestos lawsuit or the tobacco lawsuit. But you've seen a string of these things where companies are hiding information, and that's the crucial thing. If they're hiding information that they know about the consequences, then they should be liable for them. I think that is the legal thing. Diane, you're a lawyer. I'm not. I merely play one in my newsroom. Somewhere I have a Black's Law dictionary, but that's about it. And so I'm not surprised that the city sued because of the consequences of climate change here. You know, he wrote some stories back in December about you know, what the impact of the city's big project, the $50 million. It's going to be more than that, project at City Dock would be, particularly on other areas. So Annapolis, for those who don't know, is the record holder. It's the dubious distinction for rainy day flooding, which are days when it's not raining, the water just comes up and floods streets or parking lots or buildings or your home. And so it's having to spend all this money to fix these things. It's just the leading edge of it. You know, if you'll remember the former director of historic preservation for Annapolis, you know, led a study resiliency study that looked at the potential for raising or moving some of the historic buildings in Annapolis. Can you imagine moving? I don't think this was one of the plans, but just the notion of moving the Peka House with all, it's just not going to happen. I think it's pretty far up. I don't think that was actually a plan for that. I don't want to mislead you. But there is the potential for threat, and it is within our lifetimes. It is 30 years. And I don't know about you all, but I plan on living 30 more years. And so the city is trying to reap damages that have yet to really be realized. The city is going to end up paying for a number of changes, whether it's to the stormwater system, whether it's to raising City Dock 6 to 9 feet. I think that's the current plan. Whether it's for building massive pump stations, whether it's for raising causeways and roadways that flood. There are all sorts of things that they're going to be doing. They're very complicated. They're going to cost a lot of money. And so this is a good long game. This money will not come into town if, you know, in whatever settlement that it happens in 20 years. This money will not come into town to pay for anything that's currently on the books. And I think the mayor said that. So I think it's a good use. I think the city did a better job this time of picking the lawyer they went with. The lawyer they went with in the opioid lawsuit actually was the mayor's personal lawyer, had been the mayor's personal lawyer in some of the business. We criticized him for that. What he did was legal, but it just kind of didn't look perfect. In this case, they're going with a company nationally that is pursuing these things. And as Diane mentioned, it cost taxpayers nothing. They are working on a commission, which I think was 16 to 20 something % was mentioned in the story. And so this is probably a good thing for Annapolis. Anne Arundel County has said that they are going to join the lawsuit or file their own lawsuit. They have different issues. I think that you'll see this. Baltimore City has already sued. Their case has already been heard in the Supreme Court or an issue related to it. It hasn't been decided yet. I don't know how quickly a ruling will come in this. The other interesting thing in this is that this fits into the story about how the city council is set up. Annapolis has what's called a weak mayor system of government, where the mayor is a member of the city council, but has some executive powers. And so it's always going to be a decision made by the mayor, influenced by the city code, on when it's a joint decision and when it's a decision made by the mayor as the executive. In this case, the mayor argued that because it costs the city, there's no city resources being paid into this. Always put a pin in that statement, because anybody who says it's not going to cost you anything, let's come back to that issue in a couple of years and see what it ends up not costing us. Didn't need city council approval. The initial reaction from the city council was, woo, yay, this is a great idea. Next morning, the alderman for Ward 1 said that she got inundated with complaints from Ward 1, her constituents, saying, why is the city, doing this? Why are they putting resources in this? Why are we, there's this opposition to any kind of activist government. I think the mayor probably knew that was going to happen, and that's the reason why he did not consult with the city as they went forward this. It's one thing, and criticism is that a leader builds consensus. And so I think there's just some interesting dynamics going on the city council that this sort of demonstrates. But this is a story that will follow for years. I don't think the story will play out, while I'm here.
But Rick, we do have a... Oh, sorry. Ahead, just Dan. A follow-up comment is that because of your coverage of the way the opioid lawsuit was done, I think there was a lot more pressure put on the mayor to at least inform the council about how this was going to be rolled out. So it's stories or coverage you gave the opioid lawsuit that really, I think, shaped the way this is going to be handled. It's going to be a lot more transparent. And I think that goes to the importance of why we have a local paper. You actually help us do what we need to do, which is keep government transparent.
I think it's a good idea that they didn't pick the mayor's former lawyer for this lawsuit. Not that, so here's the thing about that decision. So, on the asbestos, on the opioid lawsuit, it's perfectly reasonable to have a local lawyer lead this. I don't know. At the time we didn't know anything about. I know nothing about the attorney the mayor picked. He may be really well suited for this. Just he has a business relationship with the mayor, so it's icky. It's ethically icky. Is it illegal? No. Is it going to come back to bite the mayor in the rear during the election time? I don't think so, because I don't know what the status of it is. I believe the settlements are rolling out. Nobody's gotten any money on this because of the way that the companies have structured the settlement. It's going to be years before Annapolis sees a check. But Anne Arundel County is in the same boat, and they went the other route. They joined group lawsuits with other jurisdictions. They haven't seen a check either. I know that this is going to be an issue in the election this year. We'll see how it plays out.
Thank you.
Rick, we do have a question from Amy and Dan Clements. How is it working not having a newsroom, and do you hope to get back to one?
So I will say that I am a product of a newsroom. My first newsroom as a job, I mean, not a college newsroom. I was the editor of my high school newspaper. So a classroom was my very first newsroom. I was the editor of my high school newspaper, sorry. I did feel like weeping when we closed the newsroom in March when the pandemic hit. That's when we closed the newsroom. And I think a lot of people lost track of that. The decision to close the newsroom physically for the Capitol was unfortunate. But for those of you who have anything to, any understanding of commercial real estate, how many of you would be willing to pay rent for 18 months for a place you couldn't use? So it's not surprising that they made that decision. The company invested a lot of money in making that office on Admiral Cochrane Road secure. Tomorrow, I think tomorrow's episode of Embedded is going to talk about some of those things. You know, we had Kevlar walls. It was about feeling secure. And so we were already deep into operating from our homes when the company made the decision to stop paying rent. I think actually they ended up paying out the lease, but they can take it as a loss. For anybody who's in commercial real estate, you know, if you can explain that to me, give me a call afterwards. I think I understand how it works. You pay money, you pay your rent, and you get a tax break. I'm not really sure, but you know, it was a business decision that there was sensible business reasons to do it. In terms of impacting the newsroom, I think that it has had zero effect on the coverage that we have offered this community. What it has affected is the culture of my news organization. So I've been around for 30 years, 1987. And I can tell you so many ridiculously, needlessly detailed, gossipy stories about what's happened, you know, in my newsroom over the years. Does anybody remember the movie City Paper with Michael Keaton and Glenn Close? And at some point or another, I think Glenn Close, who's the newspaper publisher maybe, punches Michael Keaton, who's like the hard-bitten city editor. And somebody asked me once if that had ever happened. Yes, it happened in my newsroom. Somebody punched. There was a fight in the newsroom one night. You know, I got to yell "Stop the presses" during the first Gulf War because at the time I was the night editor and we had closed the paper and I had gone to the Ram's Head for a beer, got there and there were Scud missiles falling on Tel Aviv, and I had to run back outside, get in my car, drive back to the office, and I got to yell "Stop the presses," and we rewrote the story because we had said that hadn't happened. Why the lack of Scud missiles on Tel Aviv was the lead story, I have forgotten. You know, how we covered 9/11, how we covered September 11th, I think was heroic. How we covered the shooting was heroic. The people who have come through the newsroom have been the paper. A paper is not a newsroom. A paper is a collection of people who put out a newspaper. And so by not all being in the same newsroom, that has hurt the culture of my news organization. I have a young reporter. He's in his second job. He had been in the newsroom for a month before we closed it. And he's been working from his apartment in Glen Burnie, going to assignments, talking to us in Zoom. How does he understand what's important to this community from us? It's coming through Zoom. Having said that, and having pointed out the difficulty, everybody's dealing with that. The problems of office culture, of organizational culture, and how to pass them on are not unique to newsrooms. I think that, you know, just in my mind, as we think about the new owner, and I'm, just to be clear, I am far enough down the organizational chart in my company that, you know, I don't expect to be in the first 10 groups that he talks to. But when, you know, when I'm asked what I think we need, and I assume I will be, I think an office is going to be one of the first things I suggest. Governments have offered to help us. The Arundel Center has a flooded basement that they have fixed up and said that we can have. It would be a media center, essentially, a press center that others would use too. We get along relatively well with the current administration. who knows what happens with the next administration. There have been plenty of times when this news organization has been in conflict with mayors and county executives and aldermen and state senators, and we don't wish to be beholden to any of them for a variety, because it makes it a little bit more difficult to do our jobs. So there's a press office in the basement of the State House. Nobody's using it right now because they're trying to stay out of these areas. So I think, and this is just me, I have no reason to believe it, I think that there will be a newsroom again. I don't think that the lack of one has hurt our coverage.
Next question is from Elvia. It seems many of your reporters are very young because the veteran reporters took buyouts. How has that affected your operation? And are you the senior guy now?
I am 62 years old, so I am almost a senior guy. I think you don't get senior until you qualify for Social Security, but I do understand that I do qualify for the coffee discount at McDonald's. I don't get my coffee from McDonald's. I'll just point that out. And even if I did, I'm not getting a damn senior discount. The issue of senior reporters taking buyouts. We'll deal with that one first. I think since Landmark, okay, so for those of you who don't need a little more history about the Capitol, Phil Merrill, who was a career State Department employee, career State Department person, and some friends from Washington bought the Capitol in 1966 from the owner of Baltimore business forms. Remember the old double ledger notebooks you used to have to record everything in if you had a cash business, that kind of thing. He owned it for a long time, and it was run by the Jackson family. The father and two sons were the top editor, the newsroom person, and then the business person, the advertising person. And they ran it for a long time. And Mr. Merrill came in and bought it, no idea what he paid for it. And he got a 5-day-a-week paper, black and white, with an office on West Street that was leaking, I think it was leaking ink into the ground. And so it was in an old bowling alley. I think we were in a lot of old bowling alleys. I'm not sure what that is, but I think the Capitol's been in 2 different old bowling alleys at one point. So he bought it in the 60s. A lot of things changed. One of the first things he did was go out to the Black funeral homes and say, what can I do here to change things? Because the paper does have a racist history. And they said, print Black obituaries. He did. And so when he died in 2006, there had been some buyouts. It happens periodically in economic contractions. The mantra is that newspapers, because they're dependent on advertising, we're dependent on advertising, are first in, last out of a recession. And so there had been some buyouts over the years. In 2009, there were layoffs, buyouts. We closed our press. And that was about 150 jobs. And we started contracting out printing press from different companies. When Landmark bought us, it took over ownership from the Merrill family, I think in 2007. There were some buyouts over the years, individually and then wider. Some of the buyouts that happen, and so what happens is that people who have been there for a while tend to be the ones who take the buyout. They're close to retirement. They're sick of it, whatever. They've got other opportunities, and it is an opportunity. So buyouts are nothing new to newspapers. People take them for a variety of reasons. And so I won't talk about the reasons that, Josh and Pat, who were the most recent ones to took theirs. You'd have to ask them. But it's not something that's new. My newsroom, because it's small, does not pay salaries that you can build a life on. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think anybody thinks it's fair. It is, unfortunately, the business model that has existed in journalism for a long time. It is not a job that you make a lot of money on. And so it's been a common thing for journalists to come here. Used to be, it was their, the first job out of college for an exceptional student, or maybe a second or third job for somebody who's bouncing around some weeklies or some smaller dailies. And so, they would come here and they would learn their craft. And we have a lot of lessons to teach here. It's always been a very good newsroom for mentoring, for teaching people how to organize their way of thinking, for teaching people how to write efficiently, various ways of approaching a story, for teaching people how to report and build sources and cover a beat. And then move on. Reporters from the Capitol are around the world. Reporters from the Capitol have gone to the Baltimore Sun, not a surprise. Reporters from the Capitol have gone to the New York Times, have gone to the San Diego Union Tribune, have gone to the Washington Post. I was going to show a slide today before I messed up that presentation by a story about the shift in Bay policy in 1985 by Effie Cotman. Effie, who now goes by Effie Dawson, lives in Annapolis, and she's now an editor at the Washington Post. So this has been a place where people have started careers. And what's happened is that career model has broken down, that there are far fewer journalism jobs. I think I read that, there's been is it 50%? There's been thousands and thousands of journalism jobs have disappeared over the last couple of years. Has the business react to the change in the revenue model? And so younger reporters tend to stay longer. And I think that is an excellent reason I'm very proud of them, for my staff to organize a union. And they are seeking better wages and a variety of other things for their members. And I think that's admirable and good. We've always had young reporters. I like telling people I've known for a long time who are in positions of responsibility, people we talk to and everybody, thank you for training my reporters. Them working with you and being a huge pain in the butt is great work. Gerald Weingrad, who's a former state lawmaker, says he used to remember getting phone calls Sunday night at 10 o'clock because we'd be working on the Monday edition. And like, why is the phone ringing at 10 o'clock? Oh my God, it's the Capitol. Do I answer or not? Mike Wagner, who is late state senator from Glen Burnie, who was involved in the light rail construction, told me a story once about how he got a phone call about a story that was going to press tomorrow about something that he didn't like regarding the light rail deal. And for those of you of a certain age, you'll know that everything was not optically pure back then. And so he knew it was coming and he didn't answer the question. He did get up really early and go and take the copies of the Maryland Gazette off his neighbor's doorstep so they would not read it. We've always relied on young reporters. To stay at the Capitol, you really have to reinvent yourself. It's tough to stay as a reporter at the Capitol because of that. I hope that changes. I hope that changes. It should change. What we do has value and people should be paid, a good wage for it. And not just the market wage, which is, this situation is not unique to us. You really have to get to a paper, a metro or a big regional to earn a wage where you can have a house, and you can start a family. And those jobs have become harder to get. I feel like I was on a soapbox then and not answering your question.
All right, we have another question from Amy and Dan. Are you interested in the environmental community writing articles on issues of importance to us?
Have you seen our opinion page? So starting in about 2006, Tom Marquardt and I began working on shifting our opinion page from syndicated columns to guest columns. And along the way, we discovered some things that worked and some things that didn't. We hired some outside people to come in and write columns. Some of those works and some of them didn't. We had, when Dr. Gridlock was really popular in the Post, we had somebody come in and write a traffic column. I mean, Annapolis has a rush minute, right? Unless it's Route 50. So starting in about 2006, we tried to move the model of the two papers. I was the editor of the Maryland Gazette at the time. Tom was I think he was the publisher of the Capitol, or he may not have been the publisher. He may have been the editor. I think it was two jobs then. And so we started to move the editorial pages so that every day there was a local opinion column. Now it's 625 words, which is not a lot, but it is journalism. It's not research papers. And we have tried to open that to every community who has something to say. Now, it has to be opinion based, and it has to be a strong opinion. No one's going to read an opinion piece with a weak opinion. I sort of think this is true. No, it's got to be, this is the issue, this is the problem, this is what we need to do. A strong opinion makes for a strong column. Those things have always been open to the environmental community. We have a column coming in tomorrow's paper about a professional sailor who is concerned about the impact of climate change on the world's ocean. He's done a round the world sail, and he believes that he has seen firsthand how things have changed in the years he's been sailing. He mentioned an ocean race that I'm not familiar with, in which 5 boats had to either finish damage or pull out because they hit trash. This is out in the open ocean. And so we always want contributions from the community, whether it's the environmental community or not. We cannot, however, turn over reporting to people who have a vested interest in it. So an environmental activist, we would not allow to write a story. People, we understand the difference between a story and an opinion piece, but others might not. That explores a particular issue. Let's talk about the paddling center at Quiet Waters Park. We would not allow, someone who's with the Friends of Quiet Waters Park to write a story exploring that issue. We've already run opinion pieces from them. We'll probably run more because I think this is going to be a big fight. But we are happy to present viewpoints, and we thrive on it, frankly. I frankly think the opinion page is the heart and soul of the Capitol. And so if you want to participate in that, you know where to reach me.
Nancy.
Yeah, any more questions?
I have a question.
Oh, go for it, Rick.
Okay. Elvia, I think I know where you live. Are you selling your house? I saw that there's a for sale sign for the building on Maryland Avenue. Where's Annapolis Green going to be based at?
Yes. Yeah, our little house there on the corner of State Circle and Maryland Avenue has been sold, and they're kicking us out.
Oh my gosh. Oh, so it wasn't yours, you were leasing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's moving in? It's not going to be like an oil company or something, is it? A lobbying of it?
The real estate agent won't tell us because it hasn't gone to closing yet.
Okay, we'll find out.
Oh, good. Please tell us.
Yeah. Okay. I will say also that there is a proposal for some new environmental group. Daggone it, I closed the tab. The Wilberforce Foundation. Anybody know what that is?
No.
It is it's a religious environmental group that is proposing something in Davidsonville, Lothian, down in that area, a non-residential religious facility. The Wilberforce Foundation is a religious environmental group, so I'm really curious to know what they're going to do. I guess you're going to discover what it's like to be virtual.
Yeah, we'll be homeless.
It's not bad. It's not bad. I feel like I'm spying on my neighbors because I look out the window while I'm working all day.
We were hopeful that speaking of Quiet Waters Park, we were hopeful that the property that they bought last year.
Yeah, but then somebody burned the house down.
Yeah, we were hoping that those buildings could be an environmental center.
I know that was something that was discussed by the people who helped orchestrate the sale. I think it was an interesting idea. I think the opposition you're seeing to the paddling rowing center would have been stronger to that. So I don't know, but I guess it's moot now. I mean, we've not come back to the story of what's going to happen to those buildings after the fire, but my understanding the damage was pretty bad.
Yeah, it's a real shame.
Yeah.
Rick, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on the NPR's Embedded podcast series. And
I hate hearing my own voice. So a couple things on that. First, Chris, the reporter who's doing it, is great, and he's probably not listening, but if he sees this, we really enjoyed working with him. We've let him into our family, and I think, because we were confident that he would be fair to us, and that's one of the things that we said no to several others because we were concerned that they were interested in a story and not in what we considered to be important. we did a little bit of it with Time Magazine after they put us on the cover. We figured kind of owed it to them. They put a picture of my dog in their video, which I'm still kind of a little bit weirded out about. Well, they wanted a picture of me after I got home, and I walk my dog when I get home. So I am concerned that I said something rude about someone that I've completely forgotten about. So I'm listening very carefully. It drops tomorrow at 4 a.m., the second episode. There have definitely been emotional ripples from some members of my staff. It's hard to think about these things once you create yourself a protective layer. When it's punctured, you're kind of surprised by it. I like to say that I've sort of hidden some of my strongest emotions under the cushions of my mind, but every once in a while I kind of find them when I'm rooting around down there. We'll see how it plays out. We'll see how it plays out. It's not just about the shooting and what happened. It is about journalism and the challenges that journalism face. And I am interested not only in seeing how you tell a story after 2 years of reporting. That's an impressive feat. So I'm interested in it professionally, and I'm interested in it because I'm part of it, which is very odd to me.
Well, your team definitely comes across as very, very professional and talented in that first
so far. One episode so far. Fingers crossed.
Okay. Any other questions?
So maybe you can tell all the people that are here how to get to that podcast. All the people that are listening.
Just look for NPR Embedded. I started listening to it to be honest, I started listening to it when they asked us. They put a reporter in long term to tell a story. They don't have a podcast every week all the time. They have stories on their website and you kind of see when they drop. This is going to be 4 episodes, drops every Thursday. It's worth listening to, but if you just Google NPR Embedded, I think it's going to be good. I understand the nervousness that people have when they talk to us and then they see they're waiting for what comes out in the next day's paper or goes online. Always have understood that. And the longer you're in a community, the more trust you get. People know they can trust you. You're not going to burn them. You're not going to misquote them intentionally. And I think that there was definitely a good amount of trust. I mean, we let Chris into a lot. And so we don't expect to be hugely surprised because we really, I really didn't call anybody mean names. I just say that. And so I think that this will be an interesting experience. It is not just about us though. It is about journalism. And as I often tell people, what happened to us didn't just happen to us. It happened to Annapolis and this wider community. And that's a hard thing, and it's awkward to be in the community and if people start talking about it, and then I have to stop and remember that it happened to them too. So we're all listening to this together. Let me know what you think.
Well, I look forward to hearing your voice tomorrow again. Well, I think that wraps it up for tonight, unless anyone has a final comment or question. I thank you very much, Rick. I really appreciate it. I love hearing your perspective, and I'll see you around the neighborhood.
Yep. It's like a big circle. I'm not going to say where I live because I don't need people coming and seeing me, but the loop is amazing in our neighborhood. Every neighborhood have one.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending, and we'll see you March 31st with Gerald Weingrad.
He'll be good.
Great. Good night.